Okay, let's see here. Where were we? Right. What's New Scooby-Doo ended in spring of 2006, and the next TV series, Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue, began running that following autumn. However, the format of this new series was completely different from the classic Scooby-Doo formula, and so as far as the direct-to-video movies were concerned, it was apparently decided that these would continue using the same team that produced What's New and maintain the classic-style format. However, even these movies were starting to play around with that format. Chill Out Scooby-Doo was released on September 4th, 2007. It was written by Adam Scheinman and Joe Sikta, with Sikta once again returning to handle directing duties. This would be the last film that producer Joseph Barbera would be involved with before his death in 2006. Legendary Hanna-Barbera character designer Io Takamoto, who came up with the original designs for Scooby and the Gang, also passed away in January of 2007, and this film is dedicated to his memory. The movie opens in the Himalayas, where Professor Jeffries, played by Alfred Molina, and his Sherpa guide Pemba make a discovery.
Yes!
The professor is looking for the legendary city of Shangri-La, but Pemba won't go on any further, and with good reason, since there's some suspicious footprints nearby. Yeah, we're doing the Abominable Snowman this go-round. Told you the end of the last movie was foreshadowing.
Are you sure? Wouldn't you like a nice ski trip to the Himalayas?
And risk a run-in with the Abominable Snowman?
The two hear a roar, the snow starts to kick up, and Pemba urges the professor to leave. Jeffries instead cuts the line, tying them together, and goes off on his own. You know, like an idiot. Pemba hesitates, which is of course the cue for the monster to show up. Meanwhile, Fred, Velma, and Daphne are in Paris, causing Daphne to wax rhapsodic.
Isn't it romantic, Freddy?
Oh man, I think I'm in love. This new cell phone rocks!
While Daphne isn't exactly thrilled with how Fred and Velma are choosing to spend their vacation, Velma finds something interesting in the newspaper.
Climbers on Mount Everest claim to have seen the Abominable Snowman, a mysterious creature believed to exist in the high Himalayas.
Now, you may be asking a certain question. Where the hell are Shaggy and Scooby? They are, in fact, here.
Like I've always wanted to fly an all-you-can-eat airline. But like, gee whiz, shouldn't we have landed in Paris by now?
You did it again, didn't you, Shaggy?
Well, gang, like here we are, Honolulu, Hawaii. Oh boy, just get a load of those white sandy beaches.
Look again, Lindbergh. That's not sand, it's snow.
So yeah, Scooby and Shaggy have basically been duped by a deranged hunter named Alphonse Lafleur, played by René Auberjonois, into getting on the wrong plane and being used as bait for the Abominable Snowman so Lafleur can catch it. Even for the What's New era, this is spectacularly dumb for Scooby and Shaggy, free buffet or not, and is just dumb writing in general. I'm not expecting Oscar-worthy screenwriting, but something less convoluted than what amounts to a glorified "how dumb are they" joke would be nice. Anyway, after getting dumped out of LaFleur's plane, Fred calls the boys but loses the signal. Daphne suggests he uses the gadgets in the phone to trace the boys' location. Discovering Scooby and Shaggy are on Mount Everest, the other three head off to find them. Meanwhile, in Pemba's village, Professor Jeffries has apparently made it back and tries once again to convince the guide to help him find Shangri-La. Pemba, however, has some very good reasons for not going back.
We have angered the creature, and now he will seek his revenge. That is why everyone is fleeing the village.
We then meet Pemba's sister Minga, who doesn't believe in the monster, and this introduction is interrupted by Shaggy and Scooby crashing into the village monastery. How they got there isn't important, it's just more slapstick. It also gives us a chance to have James Hong show up as the High Llama, because of course James Hong has a voice in this movie.
You must be very cold and tired after your long journey, huh?
Through typical screwing around, Scooby finds a not terribly well-hidden secret chamber with a large carving of the Yeti. The High Llama says they offer sacrifices to the Yeti in that room. The professor, however, is more fascinated by something else.
What an extraordinary crystal. May I examine it closer?
LaFleur shows up, but Shaggy and Scooby aren't having any of his nonsense, and when they mention their friends, Minga suggests calling them from the weather station further up the mountain and offers to guide them. Pemba vetoes that suggestion and goes in her place. Jeffries decides to come along, and LaFleur rounds out the group. Gee, this won't end in disaster at all. Speaking of disasters, apparently Fred elected to drive to the Himalayas, and as such, the gang are now in Mongolia. You know what, I'm counting it. Back at the mountain, the group stops for a snack break, and Shaggy pulls off the cover of the professor's sled, revealing enough explosives to level a small town. And it seems they're being followed.
I was going to leave the village, but then I heard the weather report over the radio. There is a terrible snowstorm coming.
Shaggy's astonished there's any sort of radio signal on the mountain, but Pemba tells him it's just the man at the weather station playing music over the local airwaves. Pemba teases Minga about having a crush on the guy at the station, but Minga insists that the storm is real. Which it is. The storm forces the group to make camp, but the professor gets out of his tent and heads off to who knows where. Later, Scooby's on guard duty but is interrupted when the Yeti's roar is heard. This makes LaFleur happy, who finally comes clean about what he's been doing this whole time.
I am Alphonse Lafleur, the greatest hunter in all the world.
And we're just monster bait to help you catch that ice-cold cretin.
Yeah, monster bait.
The Yeti shows up, of course, which starts the first chase, also of course, and as expected, Shaggy and Scooby's panic sets off all of LaFleur's traps, which also of course, wind up backfiring right on the hunter. But he's not the only one. As the chase comes to an end, Pemba gets caught in one of the traps, and Shaggy and Scooby go tumbling down the mountain when they're rescued by a familiar face.
It's me, Del Chillman. Wow, what are you guys doing up here?
Yes, Del Chillman, the cryptid enthusiast we met back in Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster. As it turns out, the search for Nessie was unsuccessful, so Del got a job here so he could find proof of the existence of the abominable snowman. He also plays music to pass the time. Speaking of which, Del leaves Shaggy and Scooby in charge of the station while he goes out to find the rest of the party. Back in the village, Fred, Velma, and Daphne have finally arrived. The village at this point is completely deserted, but they find an empty Scooby Snacks box in the temple and Shaggy and Scooby's tracks leading up the mountain, which naturally perplexes them.
But I've got a hunch our next clue will be waiting for us in thin air.
Back at the station, we get an, admittedly, pretty funny meta joke.
Hey, Scoob, you want to hear my radio voice? Like, put down your snow shovel and pick up that thin air guitar.
If you're too young to get it, Casey Kasem, the voice of Shaggy, was the host of America's Top 40 from 1970 until 1988, and then again from 1998 until his retirement in 2009. We'll talk more about that as we go on with these movies. Anyway, Fred, Velma, and Daphne come upon what seems to be the campsite, or at least somewhere the earlier chase had happened, leading them to the only possible conclusion.
He must belong to the adorable snowman.
No, Fred, it isn't the adorable snowman. This is the adorable snowman.
Like sign, I try not to make too flowery.
Velma also points out something odd about the Yeti's footprints.
The creature's footprint, while larger in size, only sinks half as deep into the snow as Daphne's.
The three of them also find Pemba, who tells them what happened the night before. They look around and discover the professor's tracks leading out of camp. Minga had apparently left no footprints at all, and her radio has been left behind, which Pemba says would never happen. The assumption is that the monster abducted Minga. And as the gang worry about Scooby and Shaggy, Shaggy's voice comes through on the radio. However, things are not exactly great at the weather station. This naturally leads into the next chase, because if you want to pad these things out to 75 minutes, you can't go wrong with slapstick and music. The chase comes to an end with the monster trapping Scooby and Shaggy on the antenna. Back at the camp, Fred and Velma head off to the weather station, while Pemba and Daphne go in search of Minga. LaFleur shows up to rescue the boys, but winds up being Elmer Fudded out of the rest of the movie. Au revoir, mes amis! Shaggy and Scooby manage to escape on a weather balloon. The monster apparently fucks off because when Fred and Velma find the station, there's no sign of it. They do find Del, though, and as they search the ruins of the station, they find something else.
According to these inventory records, a few of your helium tanks are missing.
Some of the equipment is still working when the station's seismograph starts going off, which leads Fred to conclude that something must be going on inside the mountain. Speaking of, Daphne and Pemba are in a cave searching for Minga when Daphne trips over an empty helium tank. Shaggy and Scooby fall from the balloon and wind up in a crevasse in the mountains where they encounter the High Llama, who is, of course, a resident of Shangri-La.
Welcome to the lost kingdom of Shangri-La.
This is going to start a trend in the next few movies and be repeatedly revisited in others further down the line. By this point, I doubt anyone involved with the production had any intention of making the What's New movies sync up with the Zombie Island era of movies, and we're just thinking, hey, wouldn't it be funny if Shaggy and Scooby kept encountering all this real supernatural stuff but no one ever believes them? It's frustrating, I know. And it's also my main argument that you can't really force these movies to work as one ongoing continuity. You just kind of have to take each era on its own and not relate it to the others, even if characters and other elements overlap from time to time. Fred, Velma, and Del find the seismic vibrations are coming from another crevasse on the mountain and rappel into it looking for the source. Back in Shangri-La, Shaggy and Scooby encounter the monster. Again. Don't worry, it's not another chase. They wind up evading the monster and in a minecart in the caverns underneath the city, where they find Fred, Velma, and Del. The cavern is rocked by an earthquake, which causes Daphne and Pemba to appear out of another of the tunnels. The cave starts to collapse, forcing the gang to run for it and into an adjacent crystal cavern, where they see Jeffrey setting off more explosives to loosen a large chunk of crystal, which lands on his sled, which gives Fred an idea for a plan. The trap, for once, goes off without a hitch, but the gang's theory that Jeffries is the monster has a problem.
It looks like there's still a few scares left to this snow monster mystery.
Jeffries escapes the net, and then everyone gets involved in the next chase, which is an Indiana Jones-style minecart thing. End result, Jeffries gets the crystal, Fred, Velma, Daphne, Pemba, and Del wind up back in the village, Shaggy and Scooby are in the mountain with the monster. Jeffries encounters the monster himself, and the two wind up heading back toward the village as well. Shaggy and Scooby do the old "this is a funny candle" bit and wind up starting an avalanche, and they improvise a couple of snowboards to get ahead of it. Back in the village, another trap is set.
Once they hit this last ramp, they'll catch air over the monastery wall, boosting right into the trap we made from the climbing ropes.
But, of course, because Shaggy and Scooby got ahead of Jeffries and the monster, they get caught in the trap instead. Jeffries cuts the monster loose from his sled, but this turns out to be a bad move because he goes sailing into the temple courtyard and still winds up trapped in the net. The avalanche, however, is still coming, and when it seems Del and Velma are about to be buried in snow, something unexpected happens. This leads to the solution of the mystery.
Minga!
Her motivations, however, are really stupid.
All I really wanted was to listen to Del Chillman on the radio. You see, I am your #1 fan. When I learned that you were going to be leaving the mountain, I brought the Yeti to life as a way of keeping you here.
So, yeah, basically, Jeffries just wanted to steal the crystal to sell it, and the whole thing with Shangri-La has nothing to do with anything. Oh, and LaFleur is actually alive and claims to have been saved by the actual abominable snowman. So where do we go from here? Back to Paris, where the gang have brought Minga and Del with them, but Fred seems to be missing this time.
Guys, I think I got on the wrong plane.
The van is in Paris! How did you do this, Fred? Chill out, Scooby-Doo is just painful. It feels like the original idea was to do a movie where it was just Shaggy and Scooby having an adventure, but some kind of interference happened during production. There's no reason for Shangri-La to be included in the story at all. Fred, Velma, and Daphne are completely incidental to the plot, as is the mystery itself. LaFleur and Jeffries are basically worthless, even as red herrings, and as I said, Minga's reasons for becoming the monster are just as dumb in relation to the rest of the story. In fact, that's pretty much what this movie is. Dumb. Dumb, boring, and ultimately pointless. It's clear that at this point, the What's New team were starting to run out of ideas, and thankfully, they'd only be in charge of these movies for another 2 years. Skip this one, guys. It's really not worth your time. And so we toss into the deep freeze another of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Here come those meddling kids to join the chase. No creep can keep them away.